Hello everyone, it's Mike Levin. August 17th, 2017, Thursday. Around 7:30 a.m. I'm making an early start, and I figured I'd start shooting the video from inside to sort of capture this moment in my life. Get my Apple Watch, put that on later, and start out my videos from inside here, and try and make a point about transitions. Transitions, I think, is going to be one of my subjects this morning, and simplicity. So I made a tweet recently that was, "Hey Ben, how you doing? Hope you don't mind if I just keep going with it because I have the momentum." Okay. Do you want to be in it, or do you want me to adjust my position?
Oh, I can be on this side.
Okay. We'll do that, yeah. So I did a tweet earlier this week about my book plan in one tweet. And it's just a couple lines. And that's the simplicity point. If you keep it into one tweet, you force yourself to think, and you exercise some good, paring down. You do your revision as you write. It's very different from many creative processes with Twitter. But anyway, Linux/Unix, the oddball that won, right? I'd have to open up with why things are the way they are in tech, this weird state they're in. But also kind of an awesome state, because you get to do all these really cool tech tricks with all these really free tools, and a huge bullet was dodged with the proprietary world. Unix itself could have become a proprietary tech. That's what the whole SEO lawsuit was about, and that is all behind us, and now all this wonderful stuff you can do is free for the taking. So nice career path, enjoyable work. As annoying as Unix and Linux are in so many ways, it's still a good thing they won. And I'm going to try and show people the love-worthiness in it from a person who really fell in love with the Amiga computer of yore, and fell in love with the hardware as well. Fell in love with a lot of things that were in very fixed positions, and you could do some badass stuff because you could develop muscle memory. But the Amiga was not an old school tool, it was a flash in the pan. So the second line of the tweet, or I guess the third line, because the first is my book outline in one tweet. The second is Linux/Unix, the oddball that won. And the third is timeless tools and muscle memory. Hence the talk about things like a small set of Linux commands that matter, like ls and cd and cat. And then a talk about why things like Vim are so important, even if you're only using Vim commands in evil mode in Emacs, and why the text wars, VI versus Emacs, is still a thing after 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. Right? We're talking this stuff is just about 50 years old, just as I am just about 50 years old. I'm the same age as Unix. So that's muscle memory. Certain tools are going to tend to stay around for a long time. They're like pea in the pool of tech. And once they're in there, they're not coming out. We're all trying to get Perl out of there. Why do you need Perl as the installer script engine when it's so much more pleasant to write installer scripts in, say, Python? And Bash, some form of Bash script, is always included with Unix anyway. So Perl becomes the language with overlapping redundancy stuck in a squeeze between Bash script, the sh command, and Python. Python is becoming a full-purpose sysadmin, DevOps, utility, Swiss Army knife tool chain. So Python is getting under the category of muscle memory you should have. It ain't going away. It may go from version 3 to 4. Some things may change, but typing Python in Vim is going to be like, it's going to be the movie stuff, right? You're going to be that kind of coder that can work as fast as you think, because the tools are going to fade away because you got muscle memory, right? So I like that whole mastery stuff after a few heartbreaks of what I thought were fixed location, fixed position tools, poofed, disappeared. The Amiga and all of Commodore with it. The whole active server page, that's the .asp environment. Ironically enough, I'm at a company that still has that kind of tech deployed, and that knowledge is still useful and valuable. Yay, Microsoft. There's still reasons to not throw out the, proprietary. I like my proprietary stuff, and that's sort of the counter argument. Each of these things will have counter arguments. The Unix/Linux, the oddball that won, its counter argument is the fact that there's still tons of embedded systems, and there's tons of things that are proprietary down to their micro boot kernels. And I guess I'm going to have to discuss the way, Linux boots and how truly flexible it is, and how there's a kernel, which is something totally different from what we think about, but that is what really Linux is, and everything else is GNU on top of it. Boy, so much stuff. It's like, don't get me started on self-referential acronyms, right? This humor that is embedded into this stuff is, well, it's embedded into this stuff. Linux and Unix before it are a series of punchline jokes that you really have to be a geek to appreciate. And so, yeah, so the simplicity, right? So you can keep it when you have to think back, because I lost my train of thought a few videos, right? I recovered just barely by the skin of my teeth. But by setting out a talk like this to cover 4 points, 5 lines in a tweet, you can go check, and I did the Linux one, check. I did the timeless tools and talked about what I mean by that, and fixed positions so that you can actually develop muscle memory and have the actual tools fade away, as does language. Like when you speak, right? You're not stopping and thinking when you're talking. I'm certainly not. Except maybe when you're talking in another language, a secondary language that is not your native tongue, you have to stop and translate in your head. Well, that translation layer is a thunking layer that's going through software. If you hit the hardware, you always get better performance. When you hit the hardware, you're using fixed locations and can start to master something, and the editing tools have the same rules, and so you get spontaneously at one with this piece of hardware, but hardware changes. Hence I talk about APIs, but that's not the next point. The next point, it goes Unix, Linux, the oddball that won. Timeless tools and muscle memory is the next point. And then the third point is the progression of any tech from its batch processing life, where everyone is stopping and thinking. You got to stop and think, what data sources am I pulling? You got to stop and think, where am I going to warehouse and store this data? You got to stop and think, where are the CPUs I'm going to use to do the number crunching of all the stuff I pull back, and then I'm going to process it, and then I'm going to issue reports, and people can look at these static reports for a good long while and pat themselves on the back. And that was like the Fortran days of computing, when things were brought in punch cards and trays of lined up punch cards that had to be fed into the machine just so. And there was an elite priesthood that controlled the taking of your input, the feeding it to the machine, and the taking back of the reports and presenting it to people, and everyone goes, oh, you're so valuable, you know how to operate tools and to do complex operations, so we shall reward you with big salaries. And that's, where, Big Blue came from, right? Batch processing. And enter the home computer, demonstrating real time is a thing. You mean you can just have real-time computing? You can type into a computer and you can get back output as fast as you type it in? Well, yeah. That was the big revolution that changed us from the mainframe era of the 50s to the modern era of, these things in our pockets. And we're living a real-time world, and just as we are, the field of software and systems is catching up from doing things in a batch processing way, mentality, methodology, what have you, to a real-time methodology where they know exactly where everything's coming from and they can calculate things right as it's collected. And this phase is earmarked by less reports that sort of hang around and more real-time leaderboards, scorecards that are on the wall being run, displays, flat screens that are being turned into signs that a group of people can watch in a room if it's a leaderboard environment with, say, salespeople, or it can be an app on your phone. It can be triggering notifications. Everyone who's in on the system can be notified of what's going on in the system in real time, including all the summary reports and aggregate numbers, how many people are on the system right now, how many people have interacted with it, how many interactions have they had. All this stuff can be calculated and made available into real-time reports that twinkle and change and become interactive too, because you can expose the nested hierarchy of all this, and you can start to erase the differences between tabular reports, which are dashboards that roll up all this aggregate stuff, and, you know, being at one with your data, like in that matrix sense where you see all the data running past you and you can see the woman in red as she walks by looking at the data through better JavaScript visualization libraries and, you know, the browser right now today. That seems to be the preferred way, but it was Java before that when IBM did this kind of real-time report stuff. It was all in Java, the interactive reports. And so the platform that the code runs on changes, you know, even at the server level, even the hardware in your pocket, in your phone, it all changes. Everything's getting shuffled around. So in the end, fixed position loses, except when APIs come into the picture. And the role of an API is basically to make a simulated hardware engine. Because, you know, at the end of the day, all software is wiring hardware up in a certain way. And if you want the super optimized code, you don't super optimize it on general hardware using general software. You take the, you know, compiled down to machine language code, and there's several phases of this. There's intermediary languages, you know, and there's all kinds of terminology that's used here. You'll hear ASM thrown around here because everything that is Turing complete can run any code that any other thing that Turing complete is. So this is why Amiga emulators run so well on the PCs that Amiga people used to taunt as being so inferior. Like it's no big deal at, like, you know, refresh rates of the screen that are insane. That's all because the specialized optimized hardware is exposed through APIs, and the better the API language is to take advantage of the capabilities of the hardware, the less you feel the need to hit the hardware for awesome human experiences that you're building out of these tools, right? That's what it's about. So everything progresses from batch to real time. And all that talk was just getting up to real time, those feedback loops where you can, you know, create optimization engines. So you optimize in the movement from batch to real time, because in batch you're just exploring, you're getting this stuff done, and you get it done by the skin of your teeth. In real time, you're no longer getting it done by the skin of your teeth. You need enough excess capacity to make sure that this stuff always runs, because your real-time systems rely on it. So you start to deal with scaling and redundancy, and you build out capacity. And pretty soon you find you have so much excess capacity that you could take the real-time flow of data coming in and pre-process, run data models against it, make predictions, machine learning, eventually AI, deep learning. You'll hear all this stuff thrown around, but it all basically alludes to the fact that our processing power, memory, speed of our networks, what have you, are 100 times in excess of capacity of what you need to run mere real-time systems. So, you know, eventually that's going to lead to something that will pass the other Turing test, which is convince you that it's human. If you're convinced, now there's nuances to the Turing test, like it's a Chinese, what do they call it, a Chinese room. You don't know what's on the inside, you just have the interaction through the API as is designed. And if that's the condition and you're basically talking through a hole to someone who may or may not be on the other side, and they convince you they are on the other side and they're human, that's passed the Turing test. Computers are going to pass the Turing test, let me tell you. Anyone who thinks that a computer can't, on average, be smarter than a human can, you know, of a broad spectrum that's out there, and can't convince you within my lifetime, much less my daughter's lifetime, you're nuts. These are, even if they're at most soulless, clever machines, we can make some very convincingly human, soulless, intelligent seeming machines. I mean, that's coming, so long as we don't, you know, destroy ourselves. So APIs and all this coding stuff is almost going to become optional, because you're going to be able to just talk machines into doing your bidding, but there's going to be permission levels and all the same things as there are today. So not everyone is going to have the same ability to talk awesome lives into existing. You're not just going to be able to say, okay, you know, servant robot, give me 10 more like you, and let me, you know, use them to build a house out here on some property I bought, and then just keep and get the supplies over there by, you know, chopping down trees or whatever. So I mean, the automations that are going to be possible without actual coding are immense, but not everyone's going to be able to do them. The resources are going to be divided up differently. So as things move from real time to that other place, which is really wacky and is always going to be a theme of, you know, videos, but not really the subject of my book. I'm going to have to break these books up into separate bite-sized chunks so that each one is accessible. That is a very important thing, because everything awesome looks complex when you find where they pushed the complexity and cost and, you know, pros and cons, where they pushed the complexity to. This Apple Watch I dropped in my pocket, which I'll be putting on me soon, because I'm enjoying it. I'm going through the Apple Watch experience. But the thing about this is, there's so much going on there. It's mind-boggling. It's more than supercomputers from the 60s and 70s probably, although they started to get them pretty big there. You know, they were doing bigger tasks. They were doing multi-user stuff. So multi-user versus single-user permissions. I'm so tempted to break these chapters out, because just permissions right there is big enough to be a line, but no, it's not. This third one was just simply from batch to real time to predictive, I call it, because you got enough capacity to look ahead. A few people are going to find, you know, offense or fault in merely claiming that all that machine learning stuff is predictive in nature. And then the last point is dependency woes. And with that, I'll get on the train here, because I took a little walk up to the park and back just to finish this video, because I'm enough ahead of schedule to do it. So why not do a 20-minute video on this side? The other video I was going to do was how I was changing my publishing tool sets, or refining my publishing tool sets on the desk side. So I do a lot of these walking videos because of the commute, and it's easy to do. But I'd like to do videos that's me typing in Vim, me drawing in some medium, the way Khan Academy does it. I think that's awesome. It's a wonderful way to teach. Not rely on these subscription things that'll take any picture and draw it out by hand. I looked at all these whiteboarding things, and if I want my own unique signature, if I want to broadcast something of my own, I've got to choose my dependencies. I've got to deal with dependency woes What am I going to use for writing? Well, you know, there's some logical choices. If I'm already on a computer typing in Vim and I want to record the screencast, and if I'm recording the screencast, I'm actually also probably on a Mac, because I want to be able to switch between virtual screens with a swoosh and have that horizontal ribbon effect. I think that works good for videos. I might be using VMware so that when I do those horizontal swooshes, I'm in Mac OS, then suddenly I'm in Ubuntu, and then suddenly I'm in Windows 10. That's awesome. I want one of those windows to be a place where I can freely draw. But a Wacom tablet creates this dissociation between where you're drawing and where pictures are appearing, and you got to be at the computer where you have it attached, and all these other rules. Turns out, and other stylus options. Obviously, there's the Apple Pencil on the iPad Pros, but then it's got to be on me, and how am I going to capture it in the screencast? I could do that. ScreenFlow has that capability. Solid option, tempting, but now where my iPad Pro is and whether it's always on me, big issues. They're not cheap enough to keep one on each side, and then you got to keep the Apple Pencil charged. The Note 8. The Note 8 is coming down the pike. It's going to be my birthday present to myself. My watch was my daughter's birthday present to me, and the Note 8 will be mine. And yeah, where does the money come from? I'll sell my house. I'll sell my, you know, 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom in Manhattan that I have. Eventually, you know, it's taking a while, a little longer through the summer than I had planned, but when it's gone, I won't be sorry that I was where I needed to be in order to start having some fixed position hardware so I can develop the muscle memory so that I can do the drawing portion of my screencast with a device that's always on me, that I'll be able to have displaying on the Mac desktop, so when I swoosh left and right for virtual screens, one of those screens can be me drawing by putting the Note 8's screen onto the Mac's desktop. There's a tool out there to do that, and it works with a standard USB hardware connection by just putting your phone USB port in developer mode. And by doing that, now you can screencast your Android's phone desktop to the desktop of your Mac, PC, or even Linux. All you need is a USB cable, which I'll always have on me on both sides. I'll be carrying the Note 8 around in my pocket. I might be a Note and an Apple person for a while, because it's hard to give up this old 5, I guess the iPhone 5 model, that little svelte jewelry thing. I like the Apple jewelry, what can you say? Again, I'll show the Apple Watch. I got this Milano band, magnetic. I mean, it's made for me, a neodymium magnet to hold it shut there, and you know, it's always very pretty. Makes you feel good while you tell time. I like the style stuff, I like the proprietary, I love the free and open source. I'm struggling to always stay relevant and competent, and figuring out how to do lots of neat tricks. And one of the things you always got to mitigate is your dependencies. Are you dependent on an ecosystem? Are you dependent on a particular database or even a particular data source? Are you dependent on a text editor that's only on one desktop? Or you know, that graphic stuff is a big deal. Are you a Windows or a Mac person? Well, it doesn't matter, because I do most of my work in Vim through Terminal, which is, you know, actually an SSH client, which is on anything, and I just put one on my Amazon Kindle, so in a pinch I can admin a whole empire, an enterprise. I'm getting to the point where I could do that, but you know, and I even took I'm taking Michael Kennedy's courses about Python for Enterprise, and I realize my shtick is like so different than his. He's teaching people how to do, you know, everything professional in Python. I'm teaching people Python. I think it's just something you should have in your brain like normal, you know, thought processes. I realize how close this is to being a second language, how close Python is to being my other English when I talk about data structures and lists of things and how you process things. So everything from what the data is and how you represent it in some text form, to how you interact with things in the real physical world through the use of APIs, Python APIs, to things like robots and stuff. And no one does this alone. Everyone's standing on the shoulders of giants who are standing on the shoulders of other giants, and you choose which giant's shoulders you're standing on, kind of like the way you choose dependencies. Microsoft, when it threw a Linux kernel onto Windows, chose Canonical's version of Linux, which is derived from Debian. They called Ubuntu, and Ubuntu is also the one that Google chose as the basis of Google OS, the operating system that they were going to be building on top of. So Ubuntu is a pretty badass company now. It's a big dependency in a lot of people's processes, tool chains, whatever have you, the stuff you're buying into. As is Debian, that Ubuntu is derived from. Now Debian is a Linux, so Linux is a big dependency of a lot of people, and it's hard to get away from that dependency. So, and that shoulder that you're standing on for Linux is Linus Torvalds, whose shoulders he's standing on is Ken Thompson, who's the Unix guy. So Linux, although it's not Unix, come on, it's pretty inseparable. It's powerful because you're pulling in the comp sci guys who know how to do stuff with it, and they know how to do stuff with Linux as well, because it's just like Unix, and Unix has a long tradition where they got a lot of these weird things right. Not necessarily the right way of doing things, but right enough so that it is not going away. It's pee in the pool of tech. Some of these things are not the optimal solutions. I would have much preferred the Amiga become the computing standard of the world, but they're good solutions. They work. You can build systems out of it, and it accommodates most things, even the most wacky edge cases. So your ability to accommodate edge cases is in great part defined by how you choose your dependencies. You know, if you choose Linux as your operating system dependency, in a pinch you could use a micro Linux to get some piece of hardware controlled, which could have an embedded version of Python. So without even having a real general purpose computer, you could have all the Linux stuff you're used to, all the Python stuff you're used to, and then it's just a question of the APIs you interact with, which is how you achieve storing files and, you know, managing Python code on it, and how code gets run and executed, which you wouldn't have to think about because the APIs, you know, is the Python language itself. Python is an API language to machines. So I'm coming up on half an hour video, so I really got to turn around and hop on the train, even though I'm running early, and this is no big deal to do one of these morning videos with all the stuff I have fresh on my mind to talk about. But I'll wrap it up right there. As long as this video was, I could ramble on for a half hour. It started with a 5-line tweet, and I think I got these numbers right. Boy, wouldn't that be a pisser if I lost this whole video because I got my numbers wrong. But basically it's a tweet where I said my book outline in one tweet. Unix, Linux, the oddball that won. Timeless tools and muscle memory. The progress of any tech from batch to real-time to machine learning to predictive, which is a complete circle, because then you're going to try and make your predictive processes, which are a lot looking like batch files, into more like real time. And then what comes after that, right? So that is a circular process as much as it is linear, and that's called progress. And those are the rhythms and the patterns of, you know, the progression of tech. So there's a lot of subsections to these points, but you know, that was I guess the third one. The fourth one being, what was that fourth one? You know, I covered the hardware and the mastery of the tools. Dependencies is the last one. What was that one that came in the middle? Is my book outline. And well, so much for simplicity, huh? Well, go to my tweet, follow me on all my different media channels. I push out the article-like ideas on medium.com. You can find my home at Medium by going through my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Mike Levin. It's the one where I got the E. So it's just youtube.com/MikeLevin. You'll find all the links to all my other various profiles there, and I'll keep this to 1.5 hours. Thanks for joining me. Hope to talk to you soon, and don't forget to subscribe.